In the dark corners of Blackwater Penitentiary, two legends were set to come face to face. Eddie Clark, the Beast of Blackwater, a man who dominated the prison with his fists, a man who was feared by all. And then there was Reggie Cole, a former Marine with a code of honor and a fierce determination to not bow to anyone, not even Clark. Their showdown wasn't just another prison brawl. It was a fight between strength and mind. With every inmate watching, the fight in the underground pit would determine not just survival, but who would rule over Blackwater. Stay with us to find out. There are prisons, and then there's Blackwater Penitentiary, a private state prison located in Milton, Rosa County, Florida. A place so feared, so shrouded in darkness, that even the toughest criminals lose sleep at the thought of being sent there. And yet, even in a place where men are as hard as nails, there was one who was tougher than all. Eddie Clark, the Beast of Blackwater. He was not only feared, but he was also worshipped in the worst sense of the word. The kind of man who not only ruled with the fist, but with a fist that was so clenched that it shut the mouths of the roughest men. But every king has his day of reckoning, and for Clark, it arrived in the form of another menacing prisoner. The two titans were preparing for a showdown that no one believed could occur, and no one knew how it would end. So, before I continue with the rest of the story, I have a question for you. What would you do if you were stuck in a location where only the strongest survive? What if the only chance of escape was to confront the most dangerous man in the whole prison? Consider that as we move into the darkest chapter of Blackwater's history. Eddie Clark was not born a monster. He became one. Having been raised on the brutal streets of Chicago, Eddie realized that the only way to survive was to overpower everyone in sight. Violence was his first language, and it became his only way of exercising authority. By the age of 25, Eddie had a bloody record of robberies, assaults, and gang killings. His last sin was robbing a bank, which turned into a bloodbath, and he was sent to Blackwater Penitentiary, the toughest maximum security prison in America, where he was to serve a life term. When Clark first arrived in Blackwater, he was far from the legend he would become. Initially, he was just another villain coming into a prison of horrors. Guards who did not care about the bloodshed looked impassively as new inmates were tossed into the lion's den. And the lions, these were the gangs that dominated the prison. Each block had its king, and Clark soon found out that he had to fight for his place. Blackwater was not just a prison. It was a dark fortress that housed the worst offenders in the land. It was as if the air was charged with hatred and the walls slowly moving in, with each passing moment. Eddie was always being tested in his early days. Small gangs and individuals wanted to establish themselves by fighting the new inmates. However, it did not take long for people to realize that Clark was a large, brutal man and the wrong one to mess with. He dismantled anyone who dared to challenge him, every fight adding to his reputation, so he was known as the Beast of Blackwater. Clark was built like a tank, standing 6'6" with 250+ pounds of muscle, with arms that were iron hammers. He was a man who did not take any nonsense from his fellow inmates, and those who dared to cross him never left unscathed. Blackwater was not only about physical competence, but also power and submission. Clark understood that real survival meant demanding the respect that comes with fear. He befriended the most dangerous inmates and created a gang that controlled protection, violence, and threats. His gang oversaw the contraband and dealt with matters of retribution without any question. After a while, the very name of Eddie Clark was enough to send a shiver down the spine of anyone. But there was one man who decided to take him on: Reggie Cole. Cole was not built like Clark, but he was a tough nut to crack. A former Marine with a strict code of honor, he used his mind, training, and discipline to navigate Blackwater. Cole had been imprisoned for the crimes associated with his military service, but his values were intact. In the lawlessness of Blackwater, he stayed a man of principle and did not give in to the darkness that pervaded. When Clark's men attacked one of Cole's allies, the conflict became personal. Cole, unlike others, refused to bow to Clark's dominance. The showdown between Clark and Cole was set for the pit. a secret underground arena where the guards turned a blind eye and inmates settled scores in blood. Constructed on November 13th, 1998, it was Blackwater's war zone, and nobody came out of it unharmed. No guards, no rules, just survival. It was no longer the power that Clark and Cole were fighting for, but it was a matter of pride. The build-up to their confrontation got tense with each passing day in Blackwater. Words spread like wildfire. Prisoners huddled in the darkness, knowing what was about to occur would be told in legends. Clark, physically undefeatable, was up against Cole, a man whose determination was only matched by his intelligence. The pit would be their territory. Everyone in Blackwater understood that the survivor would take over the prison. The stakes had never been higher. In the heart of Blackwater, Clark and Cole trained for the battle that would make them legends. The pit awaited their clash. When Clark entered the pit, his eyes were full of anger, and his large frame was threatening against the concrete walls. On the other side was Reggie Cole, cool and collected, his brain already planning out the next few moves. This was no ordinary fight. This was a war for dominance. The first punch from Clark was a sledgehammer aimed at the head of Cole to finish the fight. But Cole, being the agile one, was able to duck at the right time and thus avoid what could have been a knockout move. In response, he countered with a sharp, precise strike to Clark's ribs, a move that would have winded any normal man. But Clark wasn't just any man. He was a warrior, a fighter who had been in many battles in Blackwater, and thus he barely felt it. A smirk crossing his face, as if Cole's hit was just a mere pinch. In one powerful motion, Clark took a swing with his huge arm and hit Cole hard enough to send him flying into the concrete wall of the pit. The sound of the punch echoed through the basement, and the inmates stopped moving and looked at each other in surprise. Clark had the advantage on things for the next 10 minutes. It appeared that Clark fought right where he wanted it. The beast of Blackwater continued to unleash blow after devastating blow. Clark's punches were hard and fast. He was pounding Cole with no chance of recovery. The spectators thought that the fight was over. Cole was badly beaten and seemed to be almost out of breath. But the former Marine wasn't done. He had suffered worse, had been on the battlefield, and had been close to death. Now, concerned, he had to change tactics. Earlier that day, Cole had prepared for this confrontation with a brutal twist of resourcefulness. Since Cole was aware of Eddie Clark's temper and the possibility of a violent confrontation, Cole had devised a plan to arm himself. In a rare moment of unobserved freedom, he was able to get a stapler from the yard of the prison. Cole took it to his cell, and with a makeshift setup there, he disassembled the stapler, carefully removing the metal components. He took a metal strip from the stapler and spent time sharpening the edges with a piece of glass that he had collected. He spent hours in his cell carving a knife from the available materials and ensured that the blade was as sharp as possible. He then tucked the knife in the waistband of his pants and ensured that it was well hidden under his clothes so that the guards would not see. Cole's preparation didn't stop there. Realizing that it was customary to search the prisoners, he made a crude but efficient disguise for the knife. He covered it with a piece of cloth and mixed it with other personal effects to ensure he did not attract the attention of the security personnel during the regular searches. The knife became his secret weapon, a last-ditch option in case the fight turned against him. When the time came for the fight, Cole knew he had to be cautious. As the battle with Clark raged on, Cole skillfully dodged the giant's wild swings, waiting for an opportunity. Every time Clark tried to get hold of him, Cole slipped away with great finesse, saving his strength and gradually wearing down the massive opponent. Finally, when Clark started to get tired, Cole saw his opportunity. He'd been expecting this, and with great care, he pulled out the concealed knife from his belt. The blade was shining under the low lights of the pit as he placed it on Clark's neck, seizing the opportunity to get close to him. Taking advantage of his opponent's momentary vulnerability, with a swift, calculated motion, Cole plunged the knife into Clark's neck. The beast's eyes widened in shock and pain as the knife cut through his flesh. His powerful struggles grew weaker, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Clark's gasps grew weaker, his once muscular arms failing him. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, his legs buckled. and he collapsed to the cold concrete floor. The reign of Eddie Clark, the Beast of Blackwater, was over. He had been ruling that prison for many years, and all of the men in that prison dreaded him like a plague. But on this day, in the dark bowels of the pit, his fear was finally over. Standing over him was Reggie Cole, a man who survived the fight and ended Clark's reign. The man who once commanded so much respect that no prisoner of the prison dared to look at him was now a lifeless body in the pit. Eddie Clark was now dead, leaving his legacy of fear and brutality in Blackwater Penitentiary. Though he was beaten and almost knocked out, Reggie Cole was the winner. Reggie Cole was once again charged with the murder and the death penalty, but the California Innocence Project accepted his case based on his defense of attacking in self-defense. Cole was released on May 15th after serving 16 years in prison. Looking back at the incident, he said, "I keep replaying it in my mind. I was going to kill him, or he was going to kill me." With the domination of Eddie Clark over, Cole stepped into a new phase of his life, carrying the burden of his past. As time passes, one question still hangs in Blackwater's cold, dark halls. Did the silence finally tame the beast, or does his shadow still linger around? Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible tales from history's darkest corners. Stay safe, and see you in the next video.